Are you a crier? You cry easy or no?
I'm not. And I'm kind of, I mean, in some ways I can be, in certain areas, I can be a bit of a softie, but I'm not a crier. In fact, I don't know the last time I cried,
I'm going to
which is,
challenge Michaela. I know she's on here. I'm going to challenge
yeah,
her.
if she's on there.
Figure out a way to get your dad to cry.
Well,
I cry at friggin' OnStar commercials. I am the most emotional guy ever. And sometimes I can't even get words out. I'm so emotional. Jody will say, what the hell's the matter with you? And I go, I'm
yeah,
all welled up. I don't know. It's so good to see you.
yeah, you as well. Is my audio good?
You look great.
All right, great, wonderful.
You look awesome. You look awesome and you sound great.
Good. Well,
So
that might be the highlight, Mark, is that so
yeah,
far.
I teed this up a little bit. You know, this is the book I'm writing, and each week I go live on one of the chapters. And today it's about vulnerability. And I love the responses that you gave. And as I was saying before, I think that men probably struggle with this a lot more than women. And I think that men could benefit from learning to be a little more vulnerable in their life to help their relationships and a lot more. So I don't know if you want to spend a second telling us a little bit about yourself. You and I go back quite a few years, and in my previous career as an insurance broker, you were one of my coaches.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, so well, I'll start on the personal level, Mark. I'm a husband and a dad of five. So I've got five kiddos. I have one that just started college this year. So I'm starting that side of life. And I have my youngest just turned five. In fact, today's her birthday. So
Wow.
she's 5 years old. So I've got five kids spanning from 19 to five, four girls and a boy. So I'm learning more about vulnerability in that aspect. Certainly, it's just having that many people. But you know about a busy household, Mark, right? You know about that. But we connected actually through Roger Sitkins, obviously in the Sitkins group and some of the work you were doing there. And I'm the president of the Sitkins group, so I coach and consult insurance agencies. And you know, I find what's interesting about this topic is that you know, you can use professional and you can use personal, but you know, even with leaders and leaders that I work with, like one of the biggest challenges being vulnerable enough to even say, hey, I need to talk to you, right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
have all this figured out. So I think whether it's personal or professional, there's so many ways and so many discussions in this category. So I appreciate you bringing me on.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I know that you and I talked about this a little bit last week, and you know, for me, I struggled with this a little bit. Hey Janie, how are you? Good to see you on. I I'm not the best at sharing what my needs are. You know, being vulnerable is the ability to let people know about your weaknesses and all
Yeah.
of that without the fear of, you know, when you tend to share a lot, part of the fear is that you'll be judged or
Mm-hmm.
people will make fun of you or ridicule you. So that's why people tend to hold back. And men have this aura that we're strong and powerful and, you know, we're
Yeah.
not going to show our weakness. We're not going to cry. So we don't do it. So it takes effort. It takes intention to be able to be vulnerable. But with my wife, Jody, you know, for me personally, I need to be vulnerable with her so that I open the doorway for some really deep, important conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my buddy Steve Smith
Agree.
just joined. Hey, Steve, how are you? Thanks for joining. So yeah, it's personally and professionally, it's a hard thing to do for men. I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
I 100% concur. I mean, it's I think it's just, you know, part of that is just the nature, as you said, of men is that you got to be strong and tough and you know and be the leader. But I think really what it comes down in a lot of ways, and it is a challenge, certainly a challenge for me, Mark, is like, well, is being a leader meaning you have it all figured out, or that you have no chinks in the armor, or at least that's the perception you're trying to display? Or as a good leader, are they open to vulnerability? In fact, in many cases, certainly what I've seen on both sides of the coin is that whether I've had a leader be vulnerable with me or I've been vulnerable with others, what typically happens is they go, oh, I'm so glad you shared that. Or I would say, I'm
Yeah,
so glad you shared that because I thought I was the only one. I thought you were invincible. And now I know that you have problems too. And to me, I think a big part of vulnerability, the word that hits me, Mark, is that it improves connection.
yeah, I agree.
You know, I think it improves connection in a lot of ways. So, but you're right. I think it's, and I'm sure women struggle with this to a little bit, to a degree as well. And, you know, I can't speak to that so much, at least personally, but, you know, as a guy, it's whether it's with, like I said, for me, whether it's with my kids, you mentioned like, you know, with your wife and my wife, that, you know, if she's got enough to deal with, I don't want to give her more of my problems or issues, or even with my team at work, you know, like, well, someone's got to be strong and stable. So I think it's the challenge, Mark. I don't want to ramble here. It's just that balance of
Yeah.
confidence, and a balance of confidence and clear vision, with also knowing that I don't have it all figured out. And there are some things that are challenging me.
Well, you know, I tell people all the time, it's really hard being a human. It really is. It's not, you know, I don't know if we get enough coaching on being a human. This book that I'm writing, you know, this week's word is listening.
Oh,
I mean, if you can't listen to the other person, you know, you can't do anything. You're frozen. You're going to be locked out of all sorts of relationships. So, you know, humility and compassion and love and kindness and all of that are traits that are really important to be a good human.
mm-hmm.
But being vulnerable is something that I don't remember. Listen, growing up, my dad was a Marine, and you know, when you're a little kid or a little boy and you start to cry, this is what Dad would say: "Stop your damn crying, or I'm going to give you something to cry about." Well, that doesn't teach vulnerability. That
No.
teaches toughness, and you need to be tough a little bit.
Yeah.
But you know, life is hard, and I don't have everything figured out. I have a lot figured out, and I learn a lot more, and I'll learn a lot today. But it's just this whole lifelong learning that we all go through.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. My dad was not a Marine, but he was, you know, he's the oldest of 10, and you know, was born in 1940. So, you know, on a farm with
Yeah.
parents not having much money. So you just imagine, you know, being vulnerable wasn't on top of the list. Just
No.
leave it at that, right? You go out and, you know, figure it out and be tough and do whatever. And, you know, and he sort of took that into it in many good ways. There's so many good things I've learned from my dad in modeling. But, you know, vulnerability, you know, it wasn't something that jumped out. So you learn those from other places. And I think a big part, like you said, Mark, is that for men in particular, it's like, well, if I'm vulnerable, then it means I'm probably weak. And I don't want to be weak. I want to be strong.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think it's a really interesting conversation. I'm curious to learn more from you in this conversation today, because I think the thing that's already hit me is we don't talk about this very much.
No, actually, you know, to sit down with your kids and or your wife or a client and have a discussion about vulnerability really, I think, opens up the door to a safe place to talk about what's on your mind, what your
Yeah.
weaknesses are, and where you need help.
Yeah.
You know, for me to start a conversation with someone, a really important, deep conversation, to say, you know, I struggle with listening. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not the best. I've been told more than once I'm not a good listener. And the reason is, I think I'm a really smart guy. And I can have a conversation with you, and you can get halfway through what you're trying to tell me. And not only do I have the answer, but I've interrupted you and gave it to you. So if I can be vulnerable and say, hey, we're going to have a conversation today, and I have to tell you that I'm not the best listener. So I'm going to put my phone aside and turn it off. I'm going to have a blank piece of paper in front of me. I'll probably make some notes, but I'm going to listen really carefully to what you have to say and
Yeah.
make some notes. And then at the end, I might ask you a few more questions. Well, that's wide open. I suck at listening, but I'm going to listen anyway and do the best I can. You're not thinking, oh, this guy's a jackass. I'm not going to spend time with him. He's not a good listener.
Right.
Right? It's just
Yeah.
being free to be who you are with all of your wounds and all of your problems and all of your weaknesses, but still to have a good, warm, open relationship and conversation with somebody.
Yeah. As you were saying that, Mark, I think it hits me too. And again, whether it's personal, professional, whatever, I think they cross over. It's, you know, when you're able to be transparent and vulnerable, and I see my daughter's on here. Hi, Michaela. It's so funny. But But when you're able to do that, I mean, what I wrote down is go first. And when you said that, like, if you came to Mark and said, hey, we're going to have a conversation. And by the way, I'm going to be right up front with you. This is a really important conversation. I'm not always a great listener. Kind of letting one of your weaknesses out really early actually sets me at ease, because I go,
Yeah,
oh, this person cares enough to share some of the things that he's not great at, which guess what it allows me to do? Have more of an open conversation back with you with
sure.
some of the things that I struggle with too, because you never, I mean, again, it just goes back to, I think as a leader, as a man, if you go first, I think it's amazing how much deeper, and I struggle at this. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm like, wow, how much deeper you can get in a conversation, because others are more likely to, to share more thoughts than maybe they would hold back
Right,
because you were being vulnerable.
right. No, it is helpful to have that. And, also, the other part of vulnerability is this skill or talent or ability to share with other people. I'll pick Jody again, my wife, to be able to tell her that I'm struggling today with something, or this is what I really need from you today, or could you please do me a huge favor? I'm not going to get to dinner tonight. I can't cook it. Can you cook it, please? So all of that is putting a burden on Jody to do some things that let's just say I normally do that, or I said I was going to do it. I'm fearful of doing that because I don't want to burden her. I don't want to
And
put off on her what I can't handle. But that's being vulnerable. And if she comes back and she's a little mad or a little something, it's okay. We could talk about it again and say, I'm really sorry, or I'm really grateful that you did it. So I think it depends how to do it, because if you don't do that, and let's say that I'm really stressed out and I got a lot going on and I just can't get to something tonight. If I get to that thing and I do it half-ass and I don't do it with intent, don't do it with purpose, that's going to come off like I really don't care.
yeah,
So really opening the door to let people know what you need, I think, is really important. Even if you need a break,
mm-hmm.
you know. Again, this issue of being human, it's not easy, but being able to be vulnerable and show your weaknesses and show you're struggling right now,
Yeah,
I think is helpful.
yeah. I wrote down on there. It's just, it comes back to the honesty too. And I think part of that is just, I guess what's hitting me, and we're having this conversation, is all the things that are potentially hindered by not being open and vulnerable.
Yeah,
And like I said, you're right. Maybe in your situation, I'm thinking of my own wife. With all the kids doing stuff like, hey, I can't get to that. I'm like, oh boy, I said I would, and now I'm not. But I think as long as that's surrounded by continual communication, honesty of here's why this happened, and then of course, obviously, it works both ways. What a difference, I think, in
yeah,
communication and relationship versus, to me, it's like I'm going to pack all this in. I can't get to it. You don't even know what kind of day I've had today. I don't want to share it with you. And I got this, and I got this, and I got this, and I got this. So you know what? I'm just not going to do it, but I'm not going to talk about
yeah. That's terrible.
it.
I
I
mean,
know.
they
I know.
know.
I
Listen,
know.
they know. The
Yeah.
wives know, the husbands know, your friends know when you're not paying attention. They know when you're not being open. They know when you're not being honest. They know. Because it's not easy to lie. It's not easy to hold back. It's not easy to fake it. And if you're faking it and holding back and lying and you're not telling the truth and you're not really being open about why it is you're behaving the way you're behaving, you got a problem. It's just
Yeah.
your relationship will teeter-totter on a ledge that's not healthy. And the
Yeah.
reverse of that is having the courage and the ability to sit down and just be really nice and caring and kind with a conversation about what I'm struggling with right now, and I really need your help. People generally want to help, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's the other thing. You open the door for the person you're talking to serve you, which is important, I think.
Yeah. It is. It's super important. And I can think of numerous examples where I have boxed stuff in, like, I don't want to concern anybody, but you can't hide it because it comes out somewhere, probably in a way that it shouldn't, whether it's anger,
Yeah,
frustration, push people away. I mean, I've been there, and the moments you sit down and look, across the kitchen table or on the couch or whatever, and say, listen, honey, I'm struggling. Like, it's been a rough day today, and I don't want to burden you with this, but I want to be very open and honest. Like, typically that's when she's like, I'm so glad you shared this. How can I help you? And you're like, oh, you do want to help me. Of course she does. I mean, I think that's a big part, of my wife's nature, but I don't give her enough opportunities because I'd rather box it in and hold it in and then, whatever. All the stupid things that I do, Mark, and I got a number of them. So.
Well, we all do. So, but it's all about having the ability to have a conversation like this. And we're learning as we do it, and those that watch it will learn a little bit. And the book that I'm writing, I'm learning a lot. I'm getting the help of a lot of men each week who are answering questions on topics like vulnerability or listening. And some people do it well, but a lot of people don't. And this book is really about vulnerability. It's about not only my own story, but the story of so many other men who struggle with forgiveness and compassion, and sex and relationships and vulnerability. I mean, it's hard. So I'm hoping that these conversations in the book will really give men a framework in which to work on some of these things, to be a better father, a better husband, a better son, whatever it might be. I think of, I know you have 5 kids. I have 6 with Jody, and I have 3 sons of my own, and Jody has 3 daughters. And the daughters are about as vulnerable as you can get. I mean, they are honest and open, and they'll tell you, they'll tell me to my face where I screwed up and some struggles that they have. But I have 3 sons, and I'm not going to say their names because they'll probably see this. But one is about as vulnerable as you can get. The other one's like in the middle. I could pull it out. And the third one, I can't get under his skin. There's no way. There's just no way. And I love them all the same, and I love them dearly, and they're all great young men, but they're different, and they were brought up by the same parents. It's funny. But all 3 of them, need to learn how to be more vulnerable because they're in relationships, and you need to have that type of strong relationship.
Yeah, you already answered my question. Isn't it interesting, with your sons that, very similar environment, obviously, and very similar DNA, yet in that aspect, very different. And my kids are still, some of them are pretty young yet to really know kind of where they're at, but they definitely have their own personalities. And I think what's hitting me too is it comes back to modeling that and to be able to say, I think, it's one of those things, if I can sit down and be open and raw on something, which isn't easy to do. Like, you want to start a conversation, say, hey, before we get into the conversation, let me share something with you that's, a difficult issue an issue I'm struggling with or something like that. But, I think that's typically what's hitting me is just, that's when you can have some of those authentic conversations. So it's interesting. It's good.
If you're a leader, and I ran my insurance agency for years, and you and Roger coached me, and it was great. But if I stood up in front of my team at a really bad moment, like the time that we sold our agency to Brown & Brown, that Monday morning, my brother and I had to get up in front of the team and tell them what we did. And they were in tears. I mean, we were all in tears. But we didn't stand up and say, we did this and you're going to like it and it's too bad.
Yeah.
We said we spent 5 years trying to figure this out, and we made a decision, and we struggle with a decision. We're not sure really how this is going to work out because we've never sold a company before. But what we do know is we're gonna go through this together. We're gonna help each other. It wasn't any bullshit. It wasn't like just some farce thing. We did it together, and I think they really appreciated that, and then allowed for a lot of open communication. And a lot of them weren't happy about it, and but they were able to say it without being judged. That's the other thing. If you're receiving vulnerability, I think it's super important not to criticize the person, not to judge the person, but to really embrace them and just thank them for being open and honest about what they just told you.
Yeah, as you said that, Mark, I mean, you're talking from a business perspective, and I'm sure there are people that weren't happy, but to give them the space and say, listen, I think it's just that transparency, vulnerability, whatever you want to call it, and just like, I'll be open with you. And this was a really hard decision. And I think people do, even if they don't like it, I think they'll appreciate and respect And I think I'm sitting there thinking in personal situations too, where things will come out of my mouth, and certainly like with my daughters, it's like, why are you crying? Why do you feel that? I don't understand. Like, and all of a sudden, just because for me I don't get it, I'm like, why would I do that? And sit back and go, give them some space. I don't understand. I don't have to understand everything.
Yeah.
I don't live in their world, but I do think I need to have the openness to say, give them some room, right? I guess is what I'm trying to say in that.
Yeah.
So,
Are you a crier? You cry easy or no?
I'm not. And I'm kind of, I mean, in some ways I can be, in certain areas, I can be a bit of a softie, but I'm not a crier. In fact, I don't know the last time I cried.
I'm going to challenge Michaela. I know she's on here. I'm going to challenge her.
If she's on there.
Figure out a way to get your dad to cry. I cry at friggin' OnStar commercials. I am the most emotional guy ever. And sometimes I can't even get words out. I'm so emotional. Jody will say, what the hell's the matter with you? And I go, I'm all welled up. I don't know. She said, you got to toughen up. I said, no, I'm not. I'm okay who I am. That's the other thing. Yeah. Really being okay who you are.
Yeah.
I think just accepting the fact that you have weaknesses and you have strengths. This is who I am. I mean, I'm going to cry at my son's wedding this weekend. I'm going to have a tough time making the speech.
Oh,
he knows that.
I haven't gotten to some of that. And I'm sitting here going, and if Michaela's still on here, it's funny. Like, I don't have like the emotional, like, where I get like, I have like the tears. I'm like there's certain movies, like if it's a father-son thing in a movie, that'll get me. And military reunions, I will have tears when I see that. That's
great.
Yeah. Anyway, but by the way, if my phone just came on and said that, I don't know if I had a timer on or something. If this shuts off for a second, I'll turn it right back on. But I just want to give you a word of warning, so I don't know what's going on. But
no, that's fine. We're almost done. I don't want to beat a dead horse. I just really wanted to do this. We're going to put this into a YouTube episode for others to watch, and I think that men need to really, the book is for men, but women can listen to this and they can get more vulnerable too. But I just think that men need to find a way to become more vulnerable, because I believe it's going to open their heart, and it's going to open the heart of the person that you're talking to. It's going to lead them into a deeper, more meaningful relationship. It's going to open up better communication and better all-around way to live your life. And what I'm finding in the book is that a lot of men who respond say, during their career they were tough and they couldn't be vulnerable. They didn't want to be vulnerable. But as they're getting older, they're finding it easier and they're finding it more important. And I think that imagine if, this whole saying, imagine if everything I knew now, I knew when I was 30. So that, an incredible thought that if I was more vulnerable 30 years ago, where would I be today? If I was more grateful, more kind, more compassionate. So if you're a 30 or 40-year-old watching this, it's not that it's not too late. Now's the time to make some of these changes in your life.
Wow. That's great wisdom, Mark. And I mean, I'm 45, so I'm a little past the 40, but enough
You're
time.
Fine.
To think about that. And one thing I'll say on this, and I may have mentioned this in my response to you on your email, and I forgot who I heard this from, a mentor. And it was actually regards to speaking and things. So it was about public speaking, but it applies anywhere. He said, people will hear and they'll celebrate your successes, but they will connect with your failures.
Yeah.
And it's so true. It's like, oh, Mark, did this and that. And there's credibility with that, like what you did in business and all that. But like when you start talking about, let me tell you where I really screwed up. In fact, it was embarrassing. All of a sudden people be like, ooh, okay, now this guy's real, right?
Yeah.
Now he's getting vulnerable. Now I'm really getting some impact in that. And you think about all those different places you could apply that principle. It's very powerful.
Well, the chapter we did on regrets, I live a life with no regrets. And I do that because I look at my mistakes as a lesson. And if I repeat the mistake multiple times, then I'm an idiot. You learn a lesson, you should learn from it and change your ways. If being in a relationship where you're not vulnerable with the other person and the relationship goes south, How many more times do you need to do that before you realize, I better get my act together and change my ways a little bit? So I think the book's a lot about that. You're still good. I still see you fine. Looks like you might have just froze. Are you back? Are you there?
I'm back. I told you
okay.
what happened. I'm back. Yeah.
Did it go off?
You got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. It's a setting on my phone, so just give me a second so it doesn't.
No, that's okay.
There we go. I'm kind of back. I'm a little crooked, but
I
we're
see
good. Sorry
Evan Carmichael join. Hey, Evan, how are you? You know, this live was great today. I really, really appreciate you coming on and being vulnerable. We're both being vulnerable about some of our faults, but it's a healthy skill to have. I wish they taught skills like this in high school and college and grammar school, instead of teaching kids not to cry or to hold back or to be tough. It's not necessary. You need to be tough sometimes. I would call that being direct versus being tough, but anyway.
No, I agree. Thanks, Mark. I mean, it's a very interesting discussion, because I'm going, oh, this will be some interesting discussion, but I have learned a lot in just the things you're saying and asking questions. And yeah, I wish there was more of this taught, or at least talked about in situations.
There's no reason you can't coach on this now with your team.
That's true. Absolutely.
Not just your team, your clients. I mean, if you can teach your insurance agency CEOs and salespeople to be more vulnerable, I'm telling you, their relationships will improve, the client retention will improve, their sales will improve. Because people if you come across as a know-it-all and you got everything figured out, it's almost like toxic sometimes. Like, I don't want to deal with this person. They think they know everything, and nobody does.
I guess one thing on this, Mark, is obviously your background. I don't mean to keep you longer, but in the insurance world, and so for your audience, I know that's not obviously where they live, most of them. But there was you may be familiar with the best practice study that would come out. And it came out this year. What's interesting is, you talk to most people in organizations, especially in insurance, it's, profitability, revenue, again, all important stuff. Don't get me wrong. But what's interesting is the study came out, the top 3 things that were the most impactful and important for the agency was people, culture, and leadership.
Yeah.
And again, I think they're buzzwords, but what are we actually doing about it? So there's important conversations to be had.
Yeah. Well, when this is done, definitely share it with your clients. And I'm happy to come on and do this again with you for just your private clients. I'd love to do that.
Oh, that'd be cool. I'd appreciate it. That'd be great. Yeah. And I can't wait for your book.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's
everybody get his book.
Yeah. Should be out. I hope it's out in January. That's the plan.
All right. Well, get a copy for yourself, and then get it for your 20 closest friends, and then you might get started. All right.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being on today. And Michaela, thanks for being on. You got a little bit of work to do with your dad.
She's got a lot of work to do. So.
All right.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.